Hello, welcome this evening to our Glasgow Loves EU lockdown live stream. And this evening, we're really pleased to welcome Calum Devine, a student of modern languages or foreign languages, who's going to talk about Erasmus this evening, as well as the experience of learning languages and travel. And we also have with us this evening Kenny Gray, who's newly retired from teaching and who has many stories to tell of taking students, school pupils abroad, organising school trips to Paris, and also taking debating teams to the European Youth Parliament. And this evening we've got Bernd doing the technical side, and Paul will be looking at your questions that you send on social media. So please send in any questions that you have, or even just stories to tell, and we'll try and bring them into the discussion this evening. So we'll start off with Calum, and this evening, or recently, you were on the Debate Night TV programme on BBC Scotland, I believe, and you asked a question about Erasmus. What was the point you were making, and what responses did you get?
First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show, Jenny. It's a real pleasure to be on here. So it was about a month ago, start of March, I applied to be an audience member on the BBC Scotland programme Debate Night. It was a young person special, and it was designed to give young people a voice in key issues which affect Scotland. And about half an hour in or so, I asked a question about Erasmus, as the topic was in Brexit. And the Conservative MP, Andrew Boy, for a constituency up in Aberdeenshire, I think, asked a question to the young people in the audience. Why does independence seem so attractive? And for me, it was always just down to one simple issue, and that was the issue of Brexit, and more specifically to that, the issue of Erasmus. As you said earlier, I was, or rather, I still am, a student at Glasgow University studying French and Italian, and the Erasmus programme is pivotal to my degree. So, to cut a long story short, I went and asked Andrew Boy the simple question: is what, or was rather, the issue of independence is so attractive to me because I'm able to, Scotland would be in the EU, and I'm able to participate in the Erasmus scheme. Due to Scotland leaving the EU along with the rest of the United Kingdom, I'm deprived that brilliant opportunity to go abroad in Europe, go and spend 6 months to a year in France or in Italy or in another country in Europe, and be able to enjoy the full experience possible with the Erasmus scheme, whether that is going to a partnership university or being able to work as a languages assistant in possibly a French and Italian school. I can do that entirely for free. There are no costs or charges or anything like that, fortunately, because of the Erasmus Plus programme. However, that has since been scrapped by the UK government, putting in a new one, the Turing scheme. The details in that are still wholly ambiguous, and students like myself have got no idea of what that really entails. And the Erasmus programme is really the best opportunity for students like me, whether they're studying French or Italian or Spanish or German or Portuguese or Polish or whatever it is, or wherever they're wanting to go in Europe. They have the best opportunity to do that. And when I mentioned all of that to Andrew Boy, he came back and he said, wait for this, there are no benefits to young people for Brexit. No benefits at all. And suffice to say, I was very incredulous, would be the word at that answer.
Yeah, it was quite a show-stopping moment. Yeah. So, yeah, no benefits. Well, so at the very least, we want to make sure that we can try and maintain the benefits that came with Erasmus. And I mean, that programme was actually expanding, I believe, at the moment. And it had become Erasmus Plus, so it was wider than just universities. It was further education and into schools and sports clubs and things. But I think they were expanding it again. So we maybe have to keep an eye on that. And so what got you into studying languages in the first place?
So it was all about essentially making connections with people, being able to broaden my horizons and perspectives on different, not just languages, but cultures and European ways of life. Because when you study a language, you can find yourself picking up a whole new set of new pieces of information about life within that country. So for me, my knowledge of France has grown exponentially because of my studies in language and also the culture of that language, and the fact that I could go and hold albeit a very short conversation with a French person or an Italian person, wherever that would be, is something that I always find very enriching for me, and also just quite cool as well, because there's also that sort of aspect of just being able to communicate with somebody else who is out with your country, and that for me has always been something that I've found incredibly exciting and also incredibly worthwhile, because you've also got numerous employment opportunities as well, which can be had not just in Scotland or working as a translator or something, or being able to have the experience of teaching that language, but also potentially work abroad in France or Italy or in another French or Italian speaking country or region across the world, which again, that offers and opens up a whole load of opportunities. And I've always found that something to be very enriching and worthwhile for me, without a doubt.
Yeah. And were you due to go? Was it I think your second year, is that right? When were
Yeah,
you due to have gone?
so it would have been ideally at the end of this year, so maybe about September. I'm still kind of planning on going. I have submitted my application for that, but of course, some of the viewers may have heard and seen in the news that France has gone into another 3-week lockdown, so that could pose a few issues with that, certainly. So whether I go later this year or in 2022, either way, I'm just really looking forward to do it. And I think the Erasmus scheme would have been a tremendous opportunity, and without doubt is a tremendous opportunity for not just myself, but for other students like me who'll be in the same boat as me.
Okay, thank you for telling us about that. And we'll maybe come back in a wee bit to hear all about your experiences of travel, because I know you've got your map behind you. You're quite widely travelled, so I think we'll probably come back to that in a minute. But we'll talk to Kenny as well now, and we'll just hear about some of his experiences. He's taken some school pupils to debate in the European Youth Parliament. So tell us how you got into that, and what was the process, and how did that go, Kenny?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jenny. I'm very impressed by Calum and very jealous, actually, because of this languages background that he's mentioned, because it's got me thinking that, you know, my school experience did not include languages and horizons, which may become a theme this evening, because my horizons in that sense were very much more limited. You know, Calum talking about the languages in school and obviously through to university. I didn't have that experience, but very quickly, as I moved from the countryside into the city and became, you know, and then ended up starting teaching, travelled abroad to teach before teaching in Scotland, became very aware that it is the wider experiences that young people have that are most important. I do remember many years ago now taking part in some work with our Glasgow Health Board with young people, and we were providing in-service for staff. And one of the first workshops we did with staff was to ask them about their own school experiences. And this was some workshops around about HIV and AIDS and sexual health. And we were asking staff about their experiences in schools. And funnily enough, not one of the teachers we asked mentioned Mr. Gray's lesson on a Friday afternoon as being a key memory of their school experience. It was all about things they'd done in school, trips and visits. So, round about the year 2000, an education officer in the local authority came forward with an idea or a suggestion, looking for some people to take part in a European Youth Parliament event. And because I was always looking for those kind of events, I said yes. Basically, it was a very strange kind of event, it seemed at the time, because although it was debating, I was more used to parliamentary debating, which is very adversarial. Everybody argues with everybody else. I had done a bit of that myself in school, and it's great fun. However, the European Youth Parliament format is very much cooperative, collaborative, and so on. So we teams of 10, which again is kind of unusual because most parliamentary debating is teams of 2, but it was a team of 10. So there was a lot of teamwork required, and so basically we put a team together. We took part in a regional, a West of Scotland event, which the pupils very much enjoyed. They didn't win, but they very much enjoyed it. For some reason, we weren't invited back the next year, which was, it turns out, an oversight. Luckily, the team were young enough that they were able to go back the following year, and they won and went to a national event. At that time, they were held in York, and they took part with schools from across the UK and Ireland. And a team was chosen from that event to represent the UK at an international session of the European Youth Parliament, which in that year was in Torino. The European Youth Parliament's been on the go since 1997, 98, and covers 40 European countries, basically Council of Europe countries, not just EU. And they organise over 500 events a year. There are about 30,000 students get involved. And the opportunity when the team gets to go and travel abroad to one of these international sessions, of which there are 3 in any one year, they get the chance to meet up with young people from over 40 other European countries. And they discuss important issues. They prepare debates, they work in committees, they work long hours, late into the night. They hold the General Assembly, they debate all these topics. And as Calum was saying, it's the opportunity to meet with, to stay with, to share time with young people from very different backgrounds across Europe. They always have surveys about which countries have travelled furthest, who's had the most trouble, who's had the most entertaining stories, and it's a huge range of people that get involved. So that in the past there have been Russian teams, Albanian teams, Icelandic teams, and it's been fascinating seeing them getting to work with those, and some interesting kind of debates that you can have, which are very real. And there's one event in particular which stands out, which was in one of the earlier sessions, where teams from Cyprus, Greece and Turkey were trying to come to some kind of agreement and some kind of resolution around about the situation in Cyprus and the partitions and so on, and the invasions. A very, very powerful event, because you had young people who were saying, well, my grandmother every year goes to the top of a hill and looks down and to see her house, which she cannot return to, which she cannot go back to, and her uncle had been shot during the invasion and so on. And then you had another member of their committee from the Turkish side standing up and saying, well, a member of their family had been involved in the invasion and so on. And you had these young people working together to try to come to some kind of agreement, and they did so. And I still have some photographs of them putting forward their views. So it was that opportunity to share real concerns with people, young people across Europe. So I've been at 4 sessions. I've taken pupils to 3 of them, and every time I think they've found it a very important event for them, and they still talk about it.
Yeah.
Many years later.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure they do. So was there, like you said, 40 teams with like 10 people in each? Was it? Or?
Yes. Well, it varies from session to session, depending on how many countries. Sometimes countries are not able to turn up. It was a particularly interesting session with the Belarusian team and the Russian team during the various invasions that were going on, to have them in the same room debating and discussing issues which were live. Ukraine is obviously has been represented at several international sessions. So the dynamics vary all the time. But connections that young people can make when they experience that, and part of it is the travel, the difficulties of getting to various places by train, bus and plane and so on, and then going through the experience. They do all the kind of team building exercises and so on, but they definitely, I think I would say, come away changed from that, and the opportunity to take part in that kind of discussion, I think, changes people's perceptions. Calum again spoke about horizons, and certainly, the horizons that these young people have, as one girl notably on one occasion said to me on a train journey back from Durham, where they had won the selection to go to Rennes, and the girl told me in the train, Mr. Gray, my horizons are more European now than Scottish. And it was one of these throwaway, off-the-cuff comments, but one that I've not forgotten, because it did seem to represent a real change in perception, one which I think is very, very important for young people to have.
Yeah, no, hugely. It must be just such a huge experience. They probably remember it all their life. And yeah. And who it was you said it was the European Council that organised those, was it?
No, it's the European Youth Parliament, which is based in Berlin. There is a European level governing body, and they operate out of Berlin. They're funded by the Schwarzkopf Stiftung Foundation, and it's a fairly low key. There's not huge numbers of people. But they will ask for national committees from representative countries to put themselves forward to host an event, and it's then down to the national committees within each country then to organise that event. So if the event was in the UK, EYP UK would organise that. They would do all the fundraising for it. They would find the costs for that. Local authorities often support them in doing that. But again, it's different depending on the European country involved. But they're basically funded by the national committees in each of these countries. The next one coming up is in Milan at the end of April, and this year, as you can imagine, it's all online, which we may come back to later on, because it's providing a lot of opportunities. And in fact, the regional EYP events this year in the UK were all held online. There were 9 of them, 89 schools were involved, and they were very successful. And they actually ran them over 2 days rather than the usual one. And I think they've learned a lot from that. The benefits of having online committees. They had some committee meetings, for instance, which were chaired by people who were all over Europe. So instead of being stuck in one place and having to use the people that are just in the building, they were able to access people from across Europe who were chairing committees in the group. So this digital age that we're now in, I think there's a lot of advantages, and I've spoken to some of the organisers just over the weekend. In fact, one of the girls who's a former pupil who's involved, one of her comments was when I said, are you still going, EYP? She's basically said, listen, half my life is taken up with EYP. Now, she's currently doing law at Edinburgh, just started there, but EYP is still a big deal, and she has travelled, as she came to remind me, over several European countries, working with EYP, taking part in international sessions, judging, but is now doing an awful lot of it online. And there's a lot of possible advantages and benefits to doing that.
Yeah, I suppose it might get more people involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Paul's saying there's a question. Come in. Do you want to just bring that out?
Yeah, just so a quick question from Bill asking, are you aware of any of the people that have been through this process who have sort of subsequently become involved in politics to any kind of level?
Yes, there have been. I mean, I've not tracked all the ones from European, but I know there was certainly some Italian politicians in the past I noticed who had been involved in the session that I attended in Torino in 2002. But I think from our own teams that we've had there are several of those members who are now involved, both with the Scottish Government and also in Strasbourg. Actually, I've done work with the EU in Strasbourg, and Amy now lives there. But yes, there have been a few young people who've got involved in that side, the democratic process. I think the key thing is that the confidence and the experience that they have is incredibly impressive. When you're able to talk to them, and I was pleased that I got messages from various folks, some who were involved in that session in 2002. So it's a fair number of years ago, who still will speak very positively about that experience, and that's where it started. The network of people that these folk have, I think, is scary in some regards. I think, easier now than it ever was. But, you know, the contacts that they have with people across Europe, that they can speak to at the push of a button, the discussions they're involved in, you know, the things that they're engaged in and have been for the past 20 years, I think is very impressive. And as a teacher, it's what you want for the young people you're working with. You know, to see them going off, as with the conversation I had with Mira just the other day, these people are completely at home having these discussions with folk all over the place, whoever they are, whatever they're doing. They put forward their views. They listen to what other people say, because, as I say, the EYP stuff is about cooperation and collaboration. It's not trying to prove we're right and you're wrong. It's genuine engagement and discussion. From an old school motto, you know, treating others with consideration and respect. Some people will remember that as Code 23. But that's what it's really all about. And, you know, having teams from Russia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, the Cyprus, Greece, Turkey teams, Belarus, sitting down in the same room having genuine discussions, and having students make comments like, we will not make the same mistakes as our parents and our grandparents made. You know, your hope is that maybe that's true, and that there'll be some success there.
Yeah. Excellent. So it's a good model to follow. I was just going to ask Calum, did you get involved in anything like that, sort of politics at school or anything like that?
Unfortunately not, but I very much wish I did. And I very much wish I did that Kenny could have been my teacher for that, because his passion for debates there really came through. I thought, although I didn't get the opportunity to get involved in politics while I was at school, I did get the opportunity to go on many European school trips. And I can remember one time, I think it was about fourth year, so that would have been back in 2016. My school was very lucky. I went to St Ninian's High School in Giffnock, and they offered numerous trips in the foreign languages department. And in S4, I had the choice between the Spanish trip or the Italian trip. Me now doing Italian, you would think that I chose the Italian trip, but actually I went and chose the Spanish one, rather unconventionally there, and I went to Salamanca and Madrid, and that trip was honestly amazing. It inspired me to take languages further, without a doubt, although one might think it would be Spanish that I would have chosen then, but I decided to go for Italian further down the line. And just being able to go and visit so many different places whilst you're also learning as well is something that I think is extremely beneficial, because it's not just beneficial for the academic side, but also for the social side. I know that even now, that trip was about 5 years ago, and the people who I went on it with, we still talk about moments like introducing it like, do you remember this, or do you remember when, or such and such, and just having those conversations even now is something that is always a great thing to talk about. And about 6 months before that, in May 2016, I also visited Iceland as well, which was another tremendous opportunity. That was with the geography department. And obviously Iceland is full of interesting geographical stuff, but features rather than stuff would have been a better way to put that. Volcanoes and a whole host of other things. And I think the combination of those two trips in 2016 really did broaden my perspectives and a whole range of things, being able to talk with natives and being able to see how other countries, how the culture in other countries was, and also being able to learn a bit about the history. And the combination of all of that makes for unforgettable moments. And I'm just looking forward to the next time when I'm able to go and travel, and I'm sure that will be equally as unforgettable moments. But yeah, I just think every school trip that I went on for me was always extremely worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And did you decide to learn languages after being on these trips? Do you think that was what really fueled it?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can pinpoint it and say it was down to that one thing, because my mum's also a French teacher. So from a very young age, I was always brought up with a sort of motivation to do languages in that regard. But I think being able to have a role model such as my mum, who taught French and spoke a little bit of French in the house, which completely bamboozled my dad, because he was Scottish and he has had, and he doesn't know how to speak, I think, one word of French. But I think the combination of that with the school trips definitely has played a crucial role in me wanting to do languages and pursue languages at university and in my later life as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Which brings us neatly on to asking Kenny about the school trips. And yeah, I know he's put a lot of effort into organising them. Was it really worth it, all the effort?
Absolutely, yes. And I think the same sort of thing applies, in terms of experiences and broadening horizons. And in a sense, picking up on Calum's point, you're not necessarily, well, we organised Paris trips every year since 1999, I think it is. And the trips were officially down as being, I suppose, cultural. There was that kind of educational aspect that people will always want to think that there is in that trip. However, the things that are difficult to include in the kind of description of the trip are the kind of social soft skills type stuff that goes on. So, for example, sitting on a bus for 17 hours with people driving from the west of Scotland to Paris in a bus, people often say, "Why don't you fly?" Because if you fly, you get on the flight, half an hour, you're there. And it's a bit like waiting in a queue at Alton Towers. If you've ever done that, waiting for a roller coaster, if you've been at Alton Towers, if you're lucky enough to have done that when there are no queues, or Disney, of course, then it can be really boring, because you just walk on, you go on the ride and you come off and you go, right, that's great, let's do it again. Yeah, I mean, I once did the loop at Alton Towers, I think 18 times in a row with a school group, because we were there so early and there was nobody else there, and we went on it 18 times. Why? And it wasn't that much fun. Similarly, we've been in Disney where you're waiting for a brand new ride and you're waiting for 2 hours to get on it. And it's great fun because of the experience in the queues. So things like the travelling to get to Paris and a 17-hour bus journey is really character forming, and you learn an awful lot about people just from that. However, anybody proposing a school trip that only involved a 17-hour bus trip is not going to get much support for that, because I think people don't see any value. However, once you get to somewhere like Paris, there's obviously so many other things going on. So people learn self-confidence, finding their way around, the experience of speaking to people. Calum's mentioned, the languages kind of thing. Some great stories. A lot of stories on all these trips that I've done have to stay in those respective cities. I'm afraid confidentiality was promised, but listening to kids going up to try and ask for something. I remember spending a long time trying to work out with pupils how they would ask for donuts in Paris. How do you ask for a donut? And you go, the donut? Somebody trying to buy a plate at the Bayeux Tapestry. That was a great conversation as the wee girl went up and tried to have a conversation in French. But there's an enthusiasm and a willingness to engage. It's an adventure, and it's with your pals. And certainly a lot of people I've met many, many years after those trips will speak about those trips. Again, they don't come back and say, remember that lesson period 3 when you did 12th night? That was a cracker. It's remember the Paris trip. Remember I lost my ticket. Remember I got lost in the Eiffel Tower. I've been in China with school trips to China, various other places. We've had pupils going to the European Parliament to take part again in an authority organised event, which takes place every year, where they get a number of pupils indicate their interest and go and take part in those kind of events. So any event which involves that kind of travel, and even trips within within Scotland, even local trips can be very, very important. And I think they're the things that most people will remember about their own time in school positively, and the experiences you get from that.
And you wanted to make sure you could widen these experiences. That was the sort of...
I think the opportunities to broaden those in as many ways, and certainly the EYP one, that experience there certainly gives them, it's a very intellectually challenging event. It's a socially challenging. You need all the skills you can get to deal with that. And I think the most important thing is it's a genuine trip. You know, there is genuine purpose to it. And the EYP, you know, so the EYP ones, there's a real intellectual challenge taking place there. But even the trip, such as a trip to Paris, has challenges for young people. You know, being away from home, for many of these kids, it's the first time. You know, often they're away without their parents, they're with their pals, there's all the social pressures going on, then they're finding your way around a strange city, listening to my strange stories about every single street corner in Paris, which they just get worse every year and more stories, coping in a 17-hour bus journey, seeing other people in a different way. I mean, certainly we always get lots of comments about staff. You know, I do have memories of pupils saying, you know, I didn't know he was so normal talking about members of staff. So, and that, you know, I think that can be a real eye-opener for young people to suddenly realise that as I was once told, I was told it was a compliment when they said I was more like a human being than a teacher. I'm taking it as a compliment, and I'm just sticking to that. But I think there is, you know, that is an important point in that kind of developing relationships and developing knowledge of the world. And to go back to the horizons, you know, where are your horizons? Where do you see yourself being? Where do you see yourself as belonging? Where should your experiences be? And the idea is to have your experiences based on as broad a horizon as possible. So that you're quite comfortable sitting down at a table with somebody from a very poor background in Romania, somebody from a very wealthy background in Norway, somebody from a very politically challenged situation in Ukraine, and sitting around a table and discussing issues and finding out that you actually like similar music, that you laugh at similar things, that there are so many similarities there.
Yeah. How did it work language-wise? Did they?
Well, that is an interesting one, because and sometimes, especially in the early days, quite controversial. The official languages of EYP are English and French. However, and I think it's quite interesting because even French teams in the past have refused to speak French because they wanted to speak English. And I think there's a bit of tension around about that for some time. And teams from the UK had to be sensitive to that. And to be fair, some perhaps weren't always sensitive about that. Where every debate perhaps is taking place in English, it can be very easy for native speakers to dominate discussions and so on. So it had been an issue. However, certainly in the more recent sessions I've been involved in an international level, English was the preferred language, but it seemed less like a foreign language for people, because a lot of these young people, that's the language, they have their own languages, they have, you know, their own dialects within countries that they speak. In Spain, obviously, you know, the obvious ones, but and that's fine, they still speak those languages, but internationally, they're quite happy speaking English. And certainly the most recent international session I was in, which was in Vilnius, there was no sense that English was the language of the UK teams. There was a definite sense English was the international language of communication among all these teams. It's how they communicated with each other. And it felt different, I have to say, from the earliest years that I was involved, where there were issues perhaps around
okay, so maybe more people are speaking English then, maybe, yeah.
I think it's perhaps something to do with they need a common language. I suppose this is where Esperanto came from, isn't it, all these years ago? You know, they want a common language and they happen to be using English. I think perhaps it's a different debate, but, you know, does English belong to, you know, I worked in the States. They spoke English, supposedly. Nobody understood anything I said. for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had whole classes saying, we don't understand a word you're saying. I said,
Yeah.
I'm speaking English.
Yeah.
Lots of stories around that. So, you know, maybe, I certainly think that's the case. English is not
Mm-hmm.
just the language that we happen to speak around here. English is a language that's spoken all over the world. In fact, there are more English speakers, aren't there, elsewhere than there are here. So I think there are more people in China who speak English than there are in the UK who speak English.
Yeah.
So we maybe need another name for it.
I know. I'll see. Wonder if there's any social media questions from Paul coming in. Anything?
Well, so there's quite a few comments here, basically expressing sadness, really, that, you know, we've now left Erasmus, and, you know, the kind of loss of opportunity for next generation. Really, quite a few people talking about that. And then there's a few questions with a similar kind of theme, really, which is about asking. Just thinking about the levels of engagement with European programs and with language learning. Have you noticed any changes over time? You know, are we becoming less? I mean, obviously, Brexit has a massive effect, but forgetting about that for a moment, have there been trends that you've noticed about just levels of engagement with our European neighbours? Are we becoming less European?
My own experience would be no. That young people are actually very engaged, and when given the opportunity, love it. Well, why wouldn't they? I mean, if you know, everybody loves good experiences, even if some of them are a bit edgy. You know, so finding your way up and down the Eiffel Tower, going and sitting down with a group of young people, you know, 17-year-olds from very, very different backgrounds from yourself, is very scary and very challenging. I do remember. I think my own daughter had this experience in France in a family, in one exchange, sitting with a family, and every morning they had hot water. They poured out some hot water, and it's a bit odd. You drink a cup of hot water every morning, fair enough. That's obviously what we do here. And so we'd dutifully drink this cup of hot water every morning. And it was only after a few days that the dad sort of said to her, as she got by with her school French, are you not having a tea bag with your what? You're not having tea? You just have your hot water. These odd Scottish kids, you know, they drink hot water for the. Okay, so you know, these kind of cultural things, young people are very interested in that, and they engage and absolutely love that. So I don't think there's less engagement. I think it's the concern is spreading it out, because I think there are areas where that engagement is not there, and where young people don't get that opportunity for all sorts of reasons. And I do think personally there's not enough time and thought going into why that is the case and how that works. It's very easy, as it always is for people when they're talking about young people, whether it's school age or university students, whatever age they are, to be saying that they're not doing very well. It's easy to find examples of, you know, things that don't work. But I've obviously been lucky enough to be in schools throughout my career where there are lots of young people doing incredible things, and engaging in wonderful things. And I've been in schools, if you like, at both ends of the socio-economic scale. And in all of them, there are always young people who are engaged and do really, really well. You know, from kids who spent summers doing extra summer schools and special entry to get into to do law at university when it wasn't the expected thing, to folk organising events off their own back, you know, because some daft person like myself would say, look, stop moaning that you've nowhere to rehearse with your band. Why don't you just approach a local church hall or something and say, can we use your hall? Can we organise a concert? And they say, can you do that? I said, well, I don't know. Can you go and do it? And they went and did it, you know, and they go off and they organise. That's another interesting experience. So I think young people are very engaged when given the chance. Part of the problem is, unfortunately, that there's a lot of pressure that doesn't want them, that doesn't allow them to take chances and to get involved. It's like an institutional thing, which it's one thing giving young people responsibility, but it's another to actually let them get on with it and do things
Yeah. They need lots of chances to get involved, and
well, it's a challenge.
Encouragement. Yeah.
You know, it's a different thing to say.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a different thing to say to young people, we want you to take responsibility and actually make a difference. But my goodness, if they actually go and do that, they're going to be in trouble. Because the first thing that happens is you're saying, no, you can't do that. Why are you doing that? That's not what I want you to do.
Yeah.
Which gives it away. It's about what I want them to do.
I was going to ask Calum what he thinks about, like, so the sort of folk of your generation, I don't think you got the vote, is that right? In our future in Europe and your future in Europe.
Yeah, unfortunately not. I was born in 2001, so I would only have been, I think, about 15 at the time of the EU referendum, and even those a year above me and 2 years above me didn't get the vote either. And I can remember, funnily enough, I was in Salamanca in 2015, 2016, and that would have been September, and the referendum was in June. So I think it would have been about 2 months after or something like that. And I can remember when the bus came back to the school, after we'd went on the trip for about a week or so, went back, saw my mum and dad, and I think one of the first questions I asked my dad was, Dad, why did people not like that? Why did they vote to leave, to not want to do that anymore? And I just found it simply incredulous now, albeit that was quite a simplistic point of view in the situation. And I'm sure if you were to ask 30 million people, would you like to go on a holiday to Spain? I'm pretty sure 52% wouldn't say no. But it was just that sort of incredulously asking, why would you not want to do that? Why would you not want to be engaged about that? And I think it's actually went the other way, like Kenny said, about young people wanting to actually be more engaged. The fact that they're like, first of all, what is the EU? Why did people vote to leave it? And then when they see the reasons why people voted to leave it, they're like, why on earth did people vote for that? Why on earth are we now in the position that we are? Where travelling to Europe is harder, wanting to work in Europe is harder, and wanting to go and study foreign languages is now arguably a necessity rather than a simple want, because of course English is sort of decreased as a key role in the main European Parliament, as now there's only one country which natively speaks English, and that is Ireland. And being able to connect with our European partners relies on us being able to speak languages more. So I think, especially among my generation, I think there is a sense of wanting to connect with Europe more, wanting to be part of Europe. And maybe further down the line, it could be them actually saying, you know, I feel European as well. So I don't think there's a danger. Of course, this is just my opinion, and I don't have any statistics to back it up. But I think there is certainly a clear appetite from young people to want to engage with Europe, without a doubt.
Well, hope for the future then. Yeah, I know. Oh, well, I think it's been a really interesting discussion this evening, and we're going to hopefully fight to try and save like the Erasmus opportunities, and like hopefully they can carry on doing the debating in the European Parliament, European Youth Parliament, things like that. Was there any final questions, Paul, just came through on the thing?
Maybe just one. I'm just reading it, so bear with me a second. So yeah, essentially, so this is for Victoria. Essentially, asking about how do we organise in terms of fighting for everything we just lost? Because obviously we're talking about Erasmus, but there's also freedom of movement, which is a massive, massive thing to have thrown away. So I suppose, yeah. So do you have any advice about how we and other groups can try to fight for getting those?
What Calum thinks, or how to get young people involved as well. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in about one sentence, it's to show them the benefits why. And I think a harder question would be, well, how do you show the benefits of why? how do you properly connect with young people? And I think in that sense, it can be a multitude of ways. Social media is a key one. I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody from my generation who isn't on one social media site or all of them. And I think that is a clear way to do that. I think another way is to simply, and I wonder what Kenny thinks about this, to just give them the experiences of saying, here's what you can do if you're in Europe. Now, of course, that's easier said than done, and I completely understand that. But I think being able to just convey the fact that here's what we can do with the Erasmus programme, going back to the earlier point and one of the key points of the discussion, also the aspect of freedom of movement and visa-free travel and work, etc., is to say, well, here's all of this which this entails. And I think that is, if you like, the major question for the next number of years, is how do you, in this post-Brexit world, how are you able to still connect with Europe, and how do you ensure that the next generation of young people are able to say more reasonably, shall we say, for want of a better word, to say, well, here are the benefits of Europe, here's what we can do if you go and connect with European partners and neighbours. And I think that is something that, of course, is very a very pertinent question, but also something that can be quite exciting as well, because in order to understand those benefits, you obviously have to go and participate in European activities and be able to participate in exchange programmes, which is something that I'm very much looking forward to do. And from the standpoint of being able to go and live and work abroad in a European country, for me, that's something that I just cannot wait to do.
Yeah. Oh, well, fingers crossed, and let us know if you manage to do it. You can come back on and talk to us. Good. So I think we better finish off. Kenny, have you got any final things just on that? The sort of what tips of campaigning? What do you think we should do?
I think the first thing to remember is that young people will do these things again and remain engaged if it's enjoyable and if it's fun. And I think it's almost like making these experiences part of the programme. You know, it is part of that wonderful word phrase everybody knows, the curriculum for excellence. Big part of curriculum for excellence was the so-called wider curriculum. I've never used the term extra curriculum, except when talking to other people who only know that term, for many, many years. It's not an extra. You know, these activities should be part of the programme. And if young people enjoy them, if they're engaged by them, if they're challenged by them, and if they achieve self-awareness and have fun, then they'll keep coming back and they'll do these events. And there's an extent to which they have to be forced. You know, it's like going to your maths class or your English class or your French class, which Calum would have enjoyed, of course. It's something you have to do. But once they're doing it, young people enjoy these activities and they want to do more. And I think that's the key. You're not handing them something on a plate and saying, this is the experience that I'm mediating and I'm going to explain it to you. You say, we're going to go here and let's see what happens. And it's great fun. It is great fun, and they love it, and they never want to stop being involved. You know, it comes back to the question Paul asked, from somebody asking about, you know, what do they go on and do? All the people I know who've been involved in these things go on and do wonderful things in all sorts of different areas. You know, there's no set thing. There is one girl who's now a vet, who to this day it will explain, I bullied her into doing EYP. I just stopped her in the corridor and told her she was doing it because her dad wanted her to do it, and I wanted her to do it, so she's doing it, and she did it, and loved it. So, that's the key. Provide the opportunities, and everybody loves doing it. So,
great.
Travel.
And good. And anyone that's listening who wants advice from Kenny about European Youth Parliament,
absolutely
get in touch with them so we can get wider participation and young folk involved.
And the European movement. Sorry, I can mention we've mentioned the European. I know you've mentioned the European movement before in other podcasts, in other meetings, but it's connecting all these things. You know, Paul's thing about how do we move that forward is trying to connect a lot of the groups that are doing similar kind of things, and there is an issue there, I think. Because there are people doing the same thing but don't seem to be connected. And so the European youth movement is one. You know, it's finding a process, and I think that's where the digital platforms and the young people like Calum, who are all on all these platforms, maybe have an advantage there, that they can use that to connect all these different groups, because they don't need to be in the same place to do it. And that's a major, I think that's an important step forward.
Yeah, definitely trying to make sure everyone's working together. Yeah. Good. So thank you very much for this evening and all these thoughts, and hopefully we can continue all these links with Europe, and great. So thank you, Kerry, and thank you, Calum, for talking to us this evening.